Hello, welcome to Impersonal Opinion, the podcast where we don't take our opinions personally. I'm Chandler and I'm here with George Ortega, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about, how to be happy even when there are depressing things in life, and, finding that meaning and purpose, that happiness, whatever it might be for you that helps you go on even when times are tough. Because, often I feel that way just knowing about all the suffering that's going on, particularly in the animal world, and particularly how, the poor and starving people all around the world that go through great suffering, and realizing that there's so little I can do. And even though I know it's not up to me, basically, I still wish there was more I could do somehow. And I don't know, sometimes it just gets to me feeling like I'm not making enough of a difference.
All right. This is something that I have struggled with for several decades, and I have made progress in it. Basically, all right, there's several things we have to keep in mind. And sometimes it's not just a matter of keeping them in mind, Chandler. Sometimes we have to repeat these things to ourselves, so that they really sink in. One thing, and it's related. This is an impersonal opinions podcast, but this is very related to the free will thing. It's that it's not up to us. In other words, like, that basically, what the it's not up to the people. There's a lot of people doing some evil things in the world. It's not up to them. We may not be helping as much as we would like. It's not up to us. So, like you alluded to before, that sometimes you may not be doing as much as you could. That you have to recognize that for things that are, like, especially the things that are really out of our control, fundamental, like, in terms of, like, politics. Like, for example, like, I'm very concerned with animal rights, but I know just people don't even care about human rights. So, like, ba- Chandler, the other thing is, like, what I try to get myself to remember, and what I repeat to myself over and over, is, like, it doesn't help either me or them to be upset over things that are really not, under our control in any great way. How does that sound?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And it's interesting because, it's not that I feel responsible for these things because I know I'm not. And I know I'm not even approximate cause of this stuff, you know what I mean? But I guess it's just knowing that if I had more money, if I had more time, if I had more social intelligence, I somehow think, that I would be able to do more. But I understand that that's not that, it's not like I can make those things happen.
Exactly, and that's very important. That's a very important to realize. In other words, like, yes, if we had, like, a lot of money, if we had a lot of influence, if we had all these things, sure, we would be able to do so much more, but we don't. And it's very, very important to us, to not blame ourselves or holding ourselves responsible for not having these things that aren't up to us to have.
I think what I'm looking for now is I'm just looking for, well, what is my life about, in light of, what can I do for, our friend Jamie, who's kind of upset about some things, and about my girlfriend, and certain things like that, when there's people that I want to help people with their struggles. And one of the things that my mom has told me before is that sometimes just talking with her about stuff somehow helps her. And I've never understood that.
Oh yeah. Now let me see if I understand you clearly. What don't you understand about that specifically?
Well, like for example, when my mom tells me, how upset she is about the financial situation, or about, the fact that that physically she doesn't have the energy to do the housework, and, and all this stuff, things that I can't always do something about it. Once in a while I can, she'll ask me to vacuum the floor or wash the dishes, and I can do stuff like that. And those things I'm good with. That I get. But when I just sit and talk with her about this stuff, and then she says she feels better after talking to me, I'm like, what did I do? I didn't do anything. I just talked to her.
Yeah, well, there are a couple of things happen when you do that. One is like that she feels your concern for her. Whenever we're going through whatever it is, if we know somebody cares about us, that kind of lightens the load. That kind of like, other people's empathy, really does help us. And the other part, I think, is like basically when we talk to somebody about our problems, it's not only that they're hearing it, but we're hearing ourselves also. So your mom is hearing herself kind of like talk about these things. And my guess, because it happens with me, I think it happens with people in general, is as we hear ourselves describe what's going on, I think very often, we come to the realization, oh, it's really not that bad, or oh, I guess I am really managing it, oh, it really can get better. So I think it's both components. It's like her kind of like knowing that you care, and her basically hearing herself, you know, talk about these things, and that just like gets her to understand them better. It gets her to kind of like, put them in perspective.
And I guess it's interesting. I don't know exactly what it is about that, but for some reason, I'm unable to understand why that helps. I mean, well, I'm just like, for example, like you said, that lets her know that I care about what she's going through, and yet I feel like caring isn't good enough. I don't know what that's about.
Yeah, well, you want to know something in terms of like not knowing why it helps. The medical profession generally doesn't either, fundamentally. Most people outside of the general profession, they really don't know either. People rarely investigate, why things are the way they are, why, talking helps and stuff like that. But just the fact that everybody, pretty much everybody, is helped by it is just like evidence enough that it really does work. So, I'm not sure it's really so necessary for us to know the absolute workings of it. If we're helped by it, if other people are helped by it, that would be good enough.
Yeah, I think that's true, and yet at the same time, it's definitely worth exploring the reasons why that helps so much.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because I mean, like, we can explore it. For example, like another reason that comes to mind is as we're talking about our problems, about our issues, potential answers arise. We're worried about something, then we start talking to somebody about it, and then we think, oh, wait a minute, I didn't think of this. Maybe this would help, or maybe that would help. So that's another, it's why, for example, in businesses, they have brainstorming sessions. They get together, they're working on something, they have no idea what the solution is, but they know that if they talk about it, it'll generate ideas.
Well, yeah, I mean, after all, that's what we do in our podcasts a lot. We talk about things, and at the beginning, we have no idea what we're going to come up with. But that's just what happens when a bunch of people are talking about an issue. It just seems like ideas come together in a group that those people just meditating by themselves would never think of.
Exactly. And then I guess there's the other it's about like we have these negative emotions, these painful emotions like frustration, upsetness, fear. And what happens is like as we express them, we're kind of in a sense letting them out. We're kind of getting in touch with them. And like so as we get in touch with these emotions that like, because when we talk about them, they're being expressed more clearly than if we were silent about them. And so like so that it gets us in touch with our emotions, and as we get in touch with our emotions, again, that helps us to kind of like to come to terms with them, to recognize, oh, well, maybe they're not so bad.
Yeah, even though like I say I don't understand this, at the same time I notice that I've done the same thing because when I'll go into Facebook groups and rant about stuff that bugs me, and other people are doing that and everybody's liking and commenting and like, yeah, I've experienced the same thing. Like, about a whole bunch of ex-Christians explaining how scared they were, thinking they were going to hell because they had been taught that in church all their life. And I guess there's some kind of emotional support that gives us to know that other people have been through that and they understand.
Yeah, and especially sometimes if we're lucky, you're right. We'll present a problem to someone who has gone through it, and not only will we get a listening ear, we'll get really, really good advice, things that we hadn't thought about before.
Yeah, because sometimes you're in a place in your life in a situation where somebody's been there before and they can tell you what they did.
Right. All right. So another thing that I'm thinking of, why we do this, why this helps. From our free will thing, we know we're hardwired to do what we consider is right. We like to do good. It makes us feel good to do good. Okay. So yes. So what happens is so we have this this desire to do good. And so, when you're posting these posts about things that are wrong with the world that you recognize as wrong, but other people don't recognize it as clearly, don't care um, as much as they should or could about it, then again, that's helping you feel like a good person, doing something good and helping the world, helping other people.
Yeah. And I mean, I think yeah, there is a good feeling about it in some way because I mean, even though it doesn't magically transform the whole world, um, we can give examples in our lives about how, there was something somebody said, whether it was in our real life offline or whether it was online, some video we watched or some post somebody wrote that really changed the course of our lives, that made us think about something.
Exactly, exactly. And this is and this can happen online, this can happen person to person, in person. So, that's another reason why we kind of share not just our problems, but our solutions. But let's get our back, let's focus more on this happiness. Sometimes with the problems in the world, it's difficult to maintain our happiness amidst them, right?
Yeah.
So what other answers can you come up with to that can help you kind of maintain your happiness regardless of how imperfect this world is?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm working on right now, thinking about this because this is something I want to have an answer to. I mean, not just for myself, but also when we get those people who say, "Well, if we don't have free will, then what's the meaning of life? Why get out of bed in the morning?" There's those people. Um, and so clearly, our happiness can't come from being in control. It can't come from you know these things that we usually think of about how much money we make or how attractive we are or anything like that because we understand these aren't up to us. So there must be some happiness that we find automatically through experiences. Perhaps some of those experiences are more pleasant than others, and through examining our favorite moments from the past, we find out what we really like and what matters most to us.
Right. I mean, we all we all are aware of problems in the world, at least most of us, and we're aware of our own problems. Like the world is not perfect, our personal lives aren't perfect, and that's something that everyone, regardless of how lucky, they or not they may be. I think we all deal with that. Now, so imagine let's say you have two paintings on the wall and one painting really makes you feel good when you look at it, okay, and the other painting when you look at it it's like some tragedy, it makes you feel sad or upset or something, right? So but you have kind of it's not your choice because we don't have free will, of course, but you have the quote unquote choice of focusing on one painting or focusing on the other. So especially, when we consider that so much of what, happens in our lives and in the world is really not in our direct control or in our immediate control or in our control to any major extent, then it doesn't make sense to focus on the negative while we could kind of like be focused on this painting, that really makes us feel good. So we focus, like, for example, like, there's so many things that are going right in our lives. There's so many things that are going right in the world. And as we focus on that, yes, that's not going to make the negative stuff go away, but it'll allow us to maintain our happiness while we're working on it, while we're waiting for it to improve.
Yeah. So basically, you're saying like we think about the things that we enjoy in our lives, the things that make us happy, and focus on the positive instead of the negative.
Yeah, and you want to know something, because I've been working on an experiment on happiness for about 10 months now. And sometimes, like, my approach is even more direct. My approach is like, I'll sit in a chair, I will smile, because smiling is very powerful. It really evokes that feeling of happiness very, you know, quickly and easily. And I will feel happy about, not about anything at all. I'll feel happy just because it feels good to feel happy. So, sure, we can be happy about a lot of things, and that's wise, but it's also, good to be happy just because it feels good for no other reason.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I remember in one of our other impersonal opinions, you talked about how you can focus on the feeling of happiness directly, and to me that still sounds like a far out there idea.
All right, well, let's explore it a bit more. Um, let's say let's say you start thinking about Jessica, and so that's evoking good feelings. You like being with her. You're remembering times you were together. Good things that you really like about her, right? And that's bringing up good feelings in you, right? That's bringing up happy feelings.
That's right.
Right. So then what you do is, like, you kind of like distinguish between the thoughts of Jessica that are making you feel that way and the feeling, right? The thoughts and the feeling. And then you can do this about Jessica. You could do this also, let's say, about, memories in the past or hopes about the future. But the key is, like, once you've got the feeling, I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong about, feeling good about, Jessica or these things and all. But if to experiment with just like feeling happy just to feel happy, once you have evoked the happiness feeling, then you kind of like separate it from what caused it, right? From what brought it about. And just, I mean, happiness is a feeling that we feel in our bodies. Like when we smile, we feel it in our face, in our chest. It's a sensory emotion. Um, it takes practice, but that's basically the procedure. You just start from something that makes us happy. Then once we've evoked the feeling, gently separate from what made us happy to focusing on that feeling of happiness.
Yeah, I haven't quite learned how to do that yet because it's true that, when I'm thinking of Jessica or when I'm listening to a song like Shine Like Rainbows or something like that, it evokes a certain feeling in me. But what happens is as soon as the thoughts and then that feeling seems to vanish.
Right. Well, then in that case, because yes, I remember when I first started working with this, I needed much more so to keep focused on the thoughts. And if that's what you need, then fine. So, like, you go from thought to thought or stay with the same thought, that's okay. But eventually, gradually, I think you might discover that you get better and better at shifting to the emotion. But again, I have to say that's not absolutely necessary. You could stay with the things that make you happy and just be happy about them. But Chandler, I think that the important thing here is that it's wise for us to get better and better at catching ourselves when we're feeling upset about the world or about people's problems or our problems, and reminding ourselves, wait a minute, this is not helping me, this is not helping the world, it doesn't feel good. So as soon as we catch ourselves, let me think about something pleasant. Let me think about something that makes me feel good.
Yeah. So that's the thing about it is it's sort of I think what it really comes to is paying attention to what first, what thoughts triggered the feeling, but then trying to maintain that feeling perhaps even after the thought is gone.
Absolutely, absolutely, because you'll discover. Have you ever like you've had like for example like some great days, right? You wake up feeling great, you go out throughout the day, and you have no idea what it's about, right? You just feel great.
Yeah.
That and that's kind of what we're talking about. It's an example of how like we're just focused on the feeling. There isn't anything at all that's making us feel good. We're just in a great mood. So that's an example of just like we're focused on that feeling, and so it is possible in that way. Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting, and sometimes when I'm feeling happiest is when I'm out riding my bike or something. Um, I guess there's something about the fresh air and just being out in good weather that just makes me happy, and it's hard to really explain that because all the environmental factors that are affecting us are way too fast for us to perfectly comprehend it. It's sort of like the weather. We don't know all the things that went into making it what it is.
You're right. And I think like going outside, because it's not just riding a bike. I'll go out and I'll walk into town and all. And it's a couple of things. First, like the fresh air. The fresh air is great for making us feel good. But then, like you understand that our minds love stimulation. Our minds love novelty. So we get outside, you get on your bike, and you're traveling at 10, 15, whatever, and you're seeing a lot more, and life becomes much more lively. So yeah, it's really about stimulating our senses, and and the bicycle makes your body move with the body likes to move, to feel good and all. So absolutely, and we don't have to understand like these kinds of things in great detail to understand that they're really simple to do, and they really do work.
Well, this stimulation I think is a key thing because what is it when people who are addicted to, say the cigarettes or alcohol or sex or whatever, some of these things that we consider addictions that can be harmful, what are they doing? They're stimulating themselves in some way. They keep repeating a behavior because there's something they get out of it.
Right. And so like, all right, that's, unfortunately for some with some substances that just turns out to be unhealthy in the long run. You become psychologically addicted or physically addicted, or it can be harmful to the body, whatever. But, we know from our experience that many, many, completely healthy things in life will do the same thing. And Chandler, for example, let's say like so like yeah, let's say you're not feeling as good as you want to feel. You want to feel happier. So like if it's a nice day out and it's during the day, then you go on your bike and ride somewhere. If that's not possible, let's say it's raining, or let's say it's the evening or whatever, you're too tired or something. What people don't understand is that like happiness is something that we can work on, like going to the gym. So let's say like so you decide I want to feel happier, right? And so go to a pad of paper, right? And this isn't anything you have to keep. You might want to keep it as a record, but just start writing down things that you're happy about, that you're grateful for, that make you feel happy. It doesn't have to be structured or organized in any way. Just let the feelings flow. And I guarantee you, within 5 minutes, you're going to be feeling a lot better.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's something that we don't really do enough. But here's an interesting thing that some people do around Thanksgiving, which is a weird holiday for several reasons. But I remember years ago when I was a kid at this church, we were supposed to write down a list of things we were thankful for. And what I did was I wrote down almost every body part. Eyes, ears, nose, arms, legs, hands, feet. I named just about everything, and most people don't think to do that, right? But I had the longest list of anybody there.
Well, that's smart. You're right. And these things that we ordinarily take for granted, but when we stop ourselves and notice them, yeah, it feels good to have our arms and our hands and our eyes and all. Absolutely.
Well, yeah, it's something you don't think about because sure, people after, if they have a tragic accident and they lose one of their body parts like that, well, then they're very upset about it. But think about it. What if there was a way to be as happy about having those parts as that matched the sadness that people feel when they lose those parts?
Absolutely.
Hey
Absolutely.
guys,
Hey,
Hey, Michael.
Hey, Mike Walsh. Glad
how's
you
everything?
joined us. We're in
Good.
the middle of an impersonal opinion podcast, and we can kind of fill you in on what we've been talking about so far.
But Chandler, actually, like since Michael's here, basically, yeah, Michael, we're talking about happiness, and we've got about 3 more minutes till we hit the 30-minute mark. How about if we, end this podcast and then go into a free will one? Does that sound
Sure,
good or
sure.
okay?
So perhaps we should figure out how to sum up what we've said, George, in this episode.
All right. So yeah. So basically, happiness, you know, many people don't realize is a skill. In other words, like part of the skill is to be grateful for what we have, to focus on what we have. Another part of the skill is to get better and better at noticing when we're not feeling as good as we want to, and then shifting gears. If we're worried about the world, the imperfections in the world, then shift our mind to something more positive. If we're thinking about problems in our personal life that we can't do anything about, because much of what we think about, is we're not really powerless to change. You know, to tell ourselves that basically it doesn't help us to think those things. Another thing is just smiling. So like there's many different kinds of strategies that we know will make us happier, but I think the key is to kind of like practice happiness like people may practice an instrument, or people may go to the gym to work out their bodies. Like we should have like happiness workouts.
Yeah, happiness workouts. I like that comparison of just like you build muscles when you exercise, we can build our happiness muscles. Yeah. Um, So yeah, I just trying to think if there's anything else I want to say here because we still got a little time. Um, but yeah, I think what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be focusing on how I feel and think about how do I feel at my level of happiness? How am I happy or sad? And I can think about what caused it, but I can try to see if there's anything I can do to increase the happiness. It's an interesting experiment and something very new that I'm not very familiar with.
Yeah, and since happiness is really the goal of life, everything else we do is a means to happiness. I think we can include this topic in many more in personal opinion episodes, and maybe invite Jamie to like join us, and we can talk about happiness not from the free will perspective, but from a general, an all-encompassing perspective, because there's so much to cover, and it's so helpful to go through it.
There certainly is, and I think it's definitely the most important thing, really, because I mean, I think it's good to understand that free will is an illusion first before you start training happiness. But since we've already understood that, it's good to get thinking about what makes us happy, and that really has to be the point of life, because if it's not, well, what is? So, yeah, okay, I guess this is a good place to end this episode. You've been listening to Chandler Klebs and George Ortega talk about happiness and how to maintain that feeling of happiness and exercising our happiness muscles and all that. So, thank you for listening and goodbye.